Good afternoon. Listen up while I tell you an awful story. In 1917, Lenin had led the Bolsheviks, the communists, into power in Russia. He transformed the country, trying to create a communist nation. But, unfortunately, in 1924, he had a number of strokes, and eventually he died. Bloop. Like when any leader dies, there is a power struggle between who's going to take over. So let's go through the two candidates who are most likely to take over from Lenin's rather big shoes. The first is a man named Trotsky. What an impressive beard. He was a genius. He was brilliant at public speaking. He was also in charge of the Red Army, the military. He was inspirational, charismatic. He could hold thousands of people in an audience, hanging on his every word, for sometimes 3 hours. He was truly a remarkable man, a gifted intellectual. But, like many people who were brilliant, no one really liked him. He was seen as arrogant, conceited. The next man who could have taken over, who was likely to, was a man named Stalin. This is a typical picture of Stalin, and this is what he did. He wasn't in charge of the Red Army. He had a very boring job. He was General Secretary of the party. And his job consisted of being in charge of the membership of the Communist Party. This allowed him to only allow people who supported him to be members, and he promoted people who were loyal to him. So while Trotsky had no power base, no real friends in power, Stalin had thousands, and this gave him a great advantage. Also, Stalin was underestimated. He walked around with his pipe, his scruffy grey coat, and he was always covered in cigarette ash, and he was seen as a bit of a bumpkin, not to be taken seriously. However, this was a massive mistake. Stalin was a ruthless man. He had a photographic memory. He could sum up anyone's arguments, and he sat quietly in every meeting listening to what everyone said. While others talked, Stalin sat there listening, doodling, and so he was underestimated. One of the main things that got in the way of either one of these men trying to take over was that when Lenin died, he left a will. Now, when everyone dies, you're encouraged to leave a will behind. It usually states who you're going to leave the house to, any money you have, or any properties. But this was a will for who would take over the country. In it, he criticised Trotsky, saying that although he was able, not many people supported him. He was horrible about Stalin. He hated him. He said that he was a rude man and that he should be removed from his job. But for some silly reason, the political leaders of Russia decided not to take this will too seriously. They decided that since it criticised all of them equally, that they may as well bury it and ignore it. And so Stalin was not removed from his job, like Lenin told him to. In fact, he gained more powers. This was the point that they could have got rid of Stalin. The other main arguments were this. Trotsky, being a brilliant intellectual and full of brains, stated that Russia, the Soviet Union, should spread world revolution and should use the Red Army to start revolutions all across the world. This was a bit of a grand scheme and no one really took it seriously. And then Stalin came along and went, this is too big a job. Why don't we just have socialism, communism, our revolution in one country? Why don't we just make do with what we've got? This was a very simple idea. It was much easier to understand than Trotsky's idea of world revolution. So we've got two reasons why Stalin won. One, he was in charge of all membership, and he had a support base in the party. Trotsky didn't. Two, Trotsky's idea of world revolution wasn't taken seriously, while Stalin's idea of revolution in one country was. Eventually, Trotsky's removed, leaving Stalin number one. In 1941, Trotsky was assassinated by Stalin. His men stuck an ice pick into Trotsky's head, killing him. So these are the reasons why Stalin won the power struggle.